Good evening and welcome to RE Martio. This is our first episode or issue for 2016. Got a little bit of trouble getting on the gate, and today, of all days, yesterday they called a regular venue. And so, for some reason, we didn't expect to meet Tim Serianos of Remax Ultimate was kind enough to give us his space. And honestly, it's probably the nicest space we've ever been in. But unfortunately, we had a hard time letting folks know. And, excellent. And so the crowd's a little bit smaller live tonight. There's probably a bunch of folks getting at the bottom of the elevator. 250 young speakers fighting in the one we've got through. Tonight, at our kickoff, it's our pleasure, it's an honor to have Mark McLean, the president of the Toronto Real Estate Board, the largest real estate board in North America, in the world. Very important man to be with us tonight. It's an honor to have him here. He's going to give us a state of the art, or state of the real estate industry. He doesn't have that ECs today, but it's really exciting. And on top of that, we're very fortunate to be here. I don't know, Mark, I can't remember. National Real Estate Day. Absolutely, that was it. Today, of all days, today is actually the National Real Estate Day. So it's really momentous for us. Yeah. And all six of us in the room today. Hundreds and hundreds of days cyberspace. So Mark, it was awesome. Thank you. He gave us this talk a couple months ago. Things changed a little bit since at the Rotary Club. And I have about 400 people in the room, which is crazy, and I went on probably longer than I should have. So I have to try and make a point to how long do I have? As long as I'm I don't want to go drone on too long. The talk that I gave back then was called "Why the Market's Not Going to Crash." And of course, I don't have a crystal ball, so I couldn't actually naturally say that yes, the market is fine. It's not going to crash. But I think it's important that we understand some of the fundamentals about real estate and why I think we should be coming from that real place of incredible strength. And so I'm not going to say it's not why is the market not going to crash, but what I would probably want to say is that I think that there's a lot of fundamentals. Of course, we were talking. Yes, you might have articles on that. Okay. Sorry. So I talk loud enough. I don't do one movie. We have money here. Okay, so how many of you have heard of this thing called the danger report? Everyone heard of the danger report? So this was a really interesting document, and when you read it, there's a part about realtors, there's a part about brokers, there's a part about industry, and when you read it all, you think to yourself, yeah, I knew that, but you really needed someone to kind of put it all in perspective and sort of lay it all on the line. And I hope that what I can do today is kind of do that, because we talked about the real estate market, and people say, well, things are so good, and they say, immigration, fabulous, interest rates, super low, and things are great. What are the problems that exist in the market? They'll say, skyrocketing affordability issues, okay? But it's bullet points that we hear in the news a lot, and I think about those, and I think, okay, that's fine, but that really doesn't kind of tell you the whole picture, right? They talk about, the condos are overbuilding, or, what's happening, what else is going to drive the market down, and, the Canadian dollar, Chinese stock market. There are all these little things that are all at play, but the reality is that, not one of those things, in my opinion, derail the real estate market in Toronto. And I think that one of the great things about Toronto is that we are a very resilient city. And to sort of give you an example, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the U.S. market as well, but to give you an example, look at the last market meltdown in the United States and how it affected basically the United States as a whole. But if you look at the specific markets in the United States, they really weathered the storm pretty well. New York, I'm thinking about San Francisco, I'm thinking about it. And then across the world, Toronto, Vancouver, Paris, London, big metropolitan cities. And I really start to think about this whole notion of, big cities and how they are almost an entity unto themselves. We talk about Toronto as the mega city. Let's change our focus a little bit and talk about Toronto as an alpha city, because we are sort of approaching that status. And I really like to talk about that. But I remember in Toronto those 4 to 6 months back in 2008 when the stock market was going crazy and driving down. I had just opened up my own real estate brokerage, and I thought this is the end. I had all my money tied up in this, but it lasted 4 to 6 months, so it wasn't about that. So that was those were kind of some of the true facts about it. But what I want to talk about today, some of those broader perspectives, and kind of dive into some things that we probably would take for granted, or even kind of go, yeah, of course, that makes perfect sense. But we don't really articulate it to our clients, and this is one of the things as realtors we have to really kind of articulate to our clients, so that and somewhere along there, I'm going to give you what I think are a couple of our secret weapons that other places don't have. Maybe that might be interesting for you. Anyway, so let's talk a little bit about what happened last year. We had the best year ever. We sold 93,000 plus sales. Best year since 2007, the year they brought in the life transfer tax. That made a real bump up. And what's ahead for us now is probably another banner year. I mean, we're already off to a great start. But it was interesting. I went down to City Hall to do the deputation for the budget meetings, and no one at City Hall, not one person, asked the Toronto Real Estate Board, the definitive source for what sold. How's the market going to do? Not one person asked us. I thought that was outstanding. So there I was, sitting in front of all these people, budget committee, and the guy said, "So what's the market going to do?" And I said, "Well, it might go up, but it might go down. But if it goes down 5%, you're in the hole, $50 million. How do you feel about that?" It's like, yeah, very good. So, I think it was really important for us to get in their face and let them know that as a board, Toronto does have a lot of weight. We have a lot of power. We have a lot of information to share with people. So I want to get into a couple of things, and in no particular order, but those are things that we talk about. And the first one I'm thinking about is China. And we talked about China and the threat of a devaluation of their currency. I'm not an economist, but what I can tell you is that if I know my money is about to devaluate, I'm going to get it the hell out of there, because what I have is all of a sudden going to be worth a whole lot less. And so you think about all these people that have all this money, where are they going to put it? Are they going to put it in, Iran, or are they going to put it in, other places that are Russia? Those are places. No, they're going to put it. They're going to bring it to the United States. They're going to bring it to Canada. And certainly, as a country, we offer a lot of stability, probably more so than the United States. So there's another change that's happening in China right now. Right now, you're able to bring out a certain amount of money. The government will let you now take out, but they're going to be tripling that amount of money. So all of a sudden, we're going to see a real influx of money coming out of China. So that's going to create some urgency, I think, in a lot of our minds as far as where our market's going to go. Our loonie, our loonie crashed, or didn't crash, but it went down significantly. And now we're starting to see it sort of pop up again. I've had an opportunity to talk to a few people and ask, like, well, why is it now coming back up? And they said, people get nervous and they start to ride this train down. Let's just get out, let's get out, let's get out. And then they realize, things aren't that bad. And that's why the dollar's coming back up again. So I bought my ticket to go to Disney before the market crashed. Then just as I was about to leave, it went down to the rock bottom. And then as I was renting my car, I could see it started to back up again. So I don't think I really won or lost, but I definitely think that it's paving its way to kind of climb back up. But there's an interesting thing that happened many years ago when our dollar went down. And if you remember, we lost a lot of manufacturing. People to the United States. And where we gained was things like TV production. But if you drive around in Belleville or Coburg, or I have a place in Prince Edward County, so I'm driving through Trenton and stuff, you see tons and tons of it. But I don't think that's going to happen, because where we moved from manufacturing, we're now into very much a services business. And so I think what's going to happen is that we're going to see that value is going to be in the professional services, accounting, and that sort of stuff. That's where people are going to come. That's what's going to drive our dollar up. Make sense so far? Yes or no? Oil prices, that's another thing we talk about on a regular basis. So yes, bad for Alberta, but kind of good for Ontario, because we're moving stuff around. It's now cheaper to do that. Condo overbuilding, that's another big one. And we talk about that. Of course, it makes the news all the time. And you remember, not even that long ago, 4 or 5 years ago, Garth Turner was the guy, oh my God, it's a boom, it's going to bubble, the bubble's going to burst, it's a disaster. Think about this. If you don't believe that the condo market is going to crash, I personally don't. In 2005, 37% of all the transactions in Ontario or in Toronto, the GTA, were condos. That's now over 50%. So we're on a rise, and that's going to change. It's going to even go higher. But the thing that I look at particularly two things. Number one is the number of months in inventory, which is less than 2 months now. And I also look at the number of deals that are selling at or above the list price. And so every week I go through the numbers and I look at Toronto, Old City 416, and I can tell you that for the last 6 weeks in a row, the number of condos that are selling at or above the asking price is hovering around 35%. So it's a massive number. It hasn't hit that number well, it's never hit it, but the last 6 weeks it's been there. So I think that we're okay as far as condo what we're building. I don't believe that's an issue. Interest rates, again, they're at historically low levels. I don't suspect that they're going to rise, and if they do, it's a slow, gradual thing. It's not going to scare away the market. But we talk about these things, right? This is like the go-to kind of thing that everyone talks about: oil, interest rates, condo boom. And so I want to dive in a little bit more into that sort of. It's the stuff that we don't talk about, but you're going to go, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. You guys ready for that? Okay, cool. So let's talk a little bit about our workforce. Toronto. When I talk about Toronto, I'm talking about not just the 416, we're talking about the GTA, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about the Greater Golden Horseshoe, which stretches from Hamilton all the way around. It includes Oakville, and includes Durham region and all that sort of stuff. I don't know if it goes over, probably not. It starts right in that line.
We're doing
okay. The other end of the heart, I love that. Okay, so if you think about Toronto, the GTA, we have probably one of the largest collections of businesses that employ literally thousands of people. We've got the Ontario Public Service sector, which has got 65,000 employees. And if you look on their Sunshine list, which is that list of people that are making more than $100,000, it's really quite massive. People don't think about that. There's a ton of money there. If you, the Report on Business did a survey of the top 50 employers. Believe it or not, 20 of them are located in Toronto, representing about 1.2 million people, top employers in the country. We've got 4 of the top education providers. We've got York, Ryerson, U of T, George Brown. Combined, 20,000 teachers, 167,000 students. And I'm not talking about career colleges or any of those sort of things, which would add to that. Here's another one that we don't think about: hospitals. We've got Sick Kids Hospital, which is a pediatric teaching hospital, one of the largest funded hospitals for child health care services in the world. We've got Mount Sinai with assets over $500 million, 130,000 inpatient days, 20,000 surgeries a year, 7,000 babies being delivered there every year. So again, that's and the list goes on. Princess Margaret, largest cancer hospital. Sunnybrook, largest trauma center. And also one of the largest maternity hospitals in the country. We've got KMH, which is just across the street, down the road from my office, which has created a new model for patient care, research, and recovery, and single-handedly rewriting the book on mental health in the world. We've got Women's College Hospital, again, one of the preeminent hospitals for women's health issues. So you get a sense all of a sudden, we're not to be trifled with. Like we should be really proud of who we are. And I don't believe this has all happened by accident. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But let's talk about some of the other services that we have in the country. Lawyers, for instance. We've got, according to lawyers.ca, 14,000 lawyers in the city of Toronto. We've got 20 of the top 30 law firms in Canada have offices right here in Toronto. So we're also this key base of not just financial, but corporate deals, mergers and acquisitions. So you really get a sense of what's going on here. And let's talk a little bit about money. So 2.5% of Toronto's roughly 3 million people have assets outside of real estate of over $1 million. That's a big chunk of people. We've got we're 15th on the world's list of cities with the highest concentration of millionaires. We've got 1,200 or so multimillionaires. Those are people with over $30 million. We've got 5 billionaires. And of course, with all those people that are here and all those people making money, you have those thousands and thousands of people who help support those guys. Everything from the gas jockey to the barista to the realtor. Right? So I think that's something that, you know, when you hear that, you think, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. There's a lot of billionaires, there's a lot of money, but we don't put it in perspective, right? And what I'm hoping is that when you'll be able to walk away from this, you'll be able to really explain to your clients who say, I'm really worried that the market is going to go down. I think I'm just going to wait. I had a client many years ago who said, I'm just going to wait. I think the market is getting hyped up. So he sold his house at $400,000, which was near my house, which I sold for $460 about 6 months later, which just recently sold for $1.2 million. So I think he's feeling pretty bad, right? We also have 5 major sports teams. Love them or hate them. We got the Raptors on tonight. But I think collectively, that quality of professional services is one of the main reasons why we're going to just keep attracting the best, and I'll touch a little bit on that too. So we talk about immigration, but can we really pinpoint what immigration is all about, right? Like we hear people saying, yeah, hundreds of thousands of people coming to the city every year. Okay, that's probably true, but why are they coming here, right? What's the driving force? I think that Toronto and Canada in general have this sort of open arm kind of culture. But according to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, Canada has one of the highest immigration flows. And we'll talk about kind of why that is. But the employment rate for Canadian immigrants is the 3rd highest in the world. It accounts for 1.2% of population growth in the country. Compare that to 0.7 in the United States and 0.3 in the Eurozone. 50% of the people that come here are highly educated, and 100,000 foreign students are staying here after they finish their university because they are used to our city, right? They've grown to really love it. So that has given us a real kind of a global competitiveness. In fact, there was a report that said that Toronto was the 7th most, that Canada had the 7th most efficient labor force in the world. So again, so why is this immigration for us important? Because you hear people saying, well, immigration is driving up the price of homes. Okay, I'll buy that. But do we want to stop that? Think about this. If we didn't have immigration, our population would be declining. That group of people between 20 and 44 would actually be declining. And those are the people that are buying homes, that are buying cars, that are creating new households, that are paying the lion's share of the taxes, right? So we need to encourage that. And we actually wouldn't have enough to sustain any population growth in our economy. So a really bad thing. And if you think about this, in 15 years from now, so 2031 roughly, 12 million people in that greater Golden Horseshoe, 9 million of that in the GTA alone. So phenomenal growth that's coming, that's happening because of that. So you asked yourself, why Toronto? Why are they coming here? Why aren't they going to Winnipeg? Well, they're coming here because of that. I mean, maybe they go to Winnipeg, some of them are, sure, but they're coming here because of the education. They're coming here because of the jobs. They're coming here because of the diversity. And speaking of diversity, I think as a city, there's no one more supportive of that LGBT community than Toronto. I mean, we've got the Pride Parade. We've had World Pride in Toronto, which is one of the biggest parade in Toronto, Street Festival, whatever. So there you've got not only a country that is willing to accept people from all over the world. They don't care what your orientation is. I mean, that's a phenomenal thing, because I'm sure there are lots of places that don't have that. And if you're coming from another world or another part of the world, there's a place for you to live in Toronto, which is quite dynamic. 140 different neighborhoods, and really as many languages. So my wife's mother, she used to drive me crazy, because every time she got into a cab, she'd say, "Hey, where are you from? What's it like there? Why did you come to Toronto?" And she always asks these questions. It used to drive me crazy. Now I find myself doing that because I'm really intrigued where people are coming from, and that sort of that flow, ebb and flow. And so I find that quite fascinating. So I had a chance to introduce the chief of police a couple of months ago at a function downtown, and one of the things he said is that it's great that we have all these languages, but how do you police that? Because really it becomes very difficult when you're talking to people that have all different languages. So if you build a police force around that and have Sikhs working in Sikh communities, have Italians working in Italian communities, it becomes a real challenge. Right? You can see that underlying there's a lot of issues that need to be addressed. So I think all those things so far you'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. Well, what about the green belt? We hear a lot about the green belt. And in fact, we just passed, it was the 10th anniversary of the Places to Grow and Greenbelt Act. Just happened. And a lot of people would say, well, I would say half the people would say, well, this is the greatest thing we could have done for the future of our province, right? Create this great green space that will never get built on. Fantastic. And the other half would say, this has created density. It's density creep. It's created congestion and bad traffic, and it's a disaster. Well, I can tell you that we've got the 7,200 square kilometers of land all around us, and it's there to kind of protect us, right? But if we want to grow, we have to get past it. Of course, the only thing that stops us from getting past it is transit, which is obviously going to be a problem. But if you can't grow out naturally, if we want to grow out, what happens? We grow up, and that's what's creating. That's why condos are still being very, very strong. So there's a couple of problems that exist with our green belt, and that's, I think, what's really directly responsible for this. Let's call it the Manhattanization of Toronto, and that's why we've got that it contributes to some of the other things like NIMBYism, like heritage restrictions, like height restrictions, those sort of things. And it's crowding our transit. It's creating skyrocketing rents and property values. And to give you a really good example of this, low density housing. So we look at new homes being built. The starts of new homes, low rise, has dropped in half since 2002. So they're basically not making any more land, and there's no place to grow. And so that's creating a problem. That's what's driving home values up. So if you own a home, stay in your home. Don't sell your home and think I'm going to rent and pocket the money, because the longer you own it, the better off you'll be. I don't expect that it's going to drop off anytime soon. And I think that there's also been this opinion shift that's happened within various parts of the city, or within the city in general. And that is that people, I think we've moved away from a car culture. We're not getting in the car and driving places anymore. We want to shop local. We want to eat local. We want to be able to bike to work. There's a whole, that I think has really changed a lot. I don't know if anybody noticed that, but people have taken a different way. I remember 20 years ago selling houses. I wouldn't show a house if it didn't have parking. Even if the client didn't have a car, I'd say, dude, do not buy this house. You'll never resell it. No one's going to buy this house if it doesn't have parking. And now I sell houses to people that have cars, but they say, don't worry, if I don't have parking, it's fine. I'm going to leave it on the street. I bike to work. I use my car on the weekends. I'll always find parking on the weekends. And so there's a real shift in that. And I think that that's helped grow neighborhoods that probably were on the decline. This is like St. Lawrence Market, which was a bit kind of rough and tumble for a while. People didn't want to go down there. Now they're there all the time. Liberty Village is a number that just keep adding more and more infrastructure. The Distillery District, if you go down there at the Christmas Festival, it's like 50,000 people down there. It's a madhouse. The other thing that I find really interesting is this whole notion of government policy. There's a couple of things that really, in my mind, tick into that. The first is, if you watch what happened in the last federal election, where did the Liberals do all their campaigning? In the city, right? They cared about the city. They said, this is where all the votes are. This is where I'm going to go. I'm not going to go to my neck of the woods, Prince Edward County, and run a campaign there. I don't care. I'm going to pick up one seat. But if I go to Toronto, I'm going to pick up 100 seats. So that's what I'm going to do. And they hit us with all the hot button topics: transit, density, infrastructure, congestion, all those things that we care about, that we want. And just tell us what we want. We'll vote for you. And that's what happened. They won every single major city, right? And the reality is that was a really smart thing to do, because by 2050, 70% basically of the whole world is going to be living in urban centers. So it's great to live in Cobourg, and I want to run away and go visit my friends in Cobourg and Prince Edward County and Niagara and all that sort of stuff. But I live and breathe Toronto. And so, for good or bad, take your pick. I mean, some people would say, you know, I don't want to live in a city that's going to just grow to 9 million people and be congested and have to step over people when I'm trying to take my garbage out, which, you know, could happen. But the upside of it is that I believe guys like Richard Florida, who are phenomenal researchers on growth of cities, would say that, you know, when you have tons of people living in an urban center, you know, crime actually disappears, and it creates a spark of sort of innovation and design, and it's what really makes us, it drives us. So I think that that's a, you know, kind of a critical part of it. The other side of the real estate world is I was talking about government policy. The other part of government policy is this kind of notion that, you know, the government works to keep inflation at a core, you know, 2% rate kind of deal. And if they think things are getting heated up, they raise the interest rates, and if things are cooling down, they lower the interest rates, and they play that real beautiful tightrope of walking on how they do that. And if you think about interest rates, for instance, and inflation, you know, between 2008 and 2012, we had 4 changes to how we borrowed money. Each time, just to make it a little bit tighter, a little bit tougher, right? And then just recently, in 2015, we had another change that affected people, well, basically all across the country, but not so much here in Toronto. It was supposed to. So that was you know, that was another kind of way where government policy was set to keep the market in check, and I think that's a good thing. A couple of weeks ago, I was in, or last week, I was in the United States at a NAR conference, and really interesting talking to Lawrence Yoon. He's the chief economist for NAR. This guy, all he does is pour over numbers all day long with this huge staff of people. But I want to tell you a little bit about what's happening in the United States, because you hear about things like, well, you know, the money's tight, but people are building and people are getting back to work and unemployment is dropping and all that sort of stuff. And they talk a little bit about inflation, and they say, you know, inflation is low, but why are people are having a hard time feeding their families? It's a crazy notion. Well, in the United States, and I presume in Canada as well, inflation is a bunch of things. It's all the food and groceries that you buy, but it's also the gas that you put in your car. And so when gas goes down and food goes up, the inflation rate stays the same. So people are struggling to live on a regular basis, but they can, you know, drive their cars because gas is cheap. So it kind of skews that CPI kind of thing. So what's happening in the States is crushing debt. Student debt is astronomical. In fact, when I was there, we were talking to a senator who was trying to pass a bill where they were actually going to help students refinance because the debt is just insane, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And as a result, a lot of these people can't even find a home because the debt is so bad on them. They can't buy, they can't rent. And what's happening is a lot of these people who are finishing university, and I talked to a ton of people who are saying, my kids are moving back into the house and they're getting married, they're living in their house, they're having their kids in my house. All of a sudden, this multi-generational family that's developing. Builders who have traditionally had you know, free reign getting money and building homes are now finding, well, money's still a bit tight, but land costs and the labor costs have gone up. It's now more expensive to build a home than ever before. So I can't build a $200,000 home. Now I'm talking generalities. I'm talking about the USA, not individual pockets, because things change. So generalities. They're saying, well, you know, I can't build a $200,000 home. I have to build a higher end home if I'm going to make any money. So we're building all these higher end homes, and there's no one available to build a low end home for people who are buying as a first time. So what's happening is those people who can't buy, first time buyers can't buy homes, they're renting. So people are building rental apartments. But there's so many people who want to rent that it's actually driving up the price of rent. And so now people can't buy and they can't rent. So it's creating a very tricky situation where I look at it and I think, you know, if you exponentially grow this, what's going to happen in the United States? I think what we'll see is that people will live in this almost indebted servitude. They'll never be able to buy a home. They'll always be stuck paying ridiculous rents. And I think that's a huge problem. So I do want to talk a little bit about what I consider are kind of secret weapons. And these are things that we don't really think about. And they're great bullet points. The first one is our temperature in Toronto. I mean, it's cold 6 months of the year. The United States give up their homes and keep their car, right? How many stories have we heard? People living in their cars, right? Because they needed to get to work, because they're living outskirts and they need to drive in to get to do their job. They're willing to give up their house but live in their car. We don't have that. We can't do that here. It's too cold. So people would rather give up their car and take the subway, right? So that's kind of one thing that's working to help us, keep the stock going. And whether you think this is appropriate, I think it's really interesting that Canada has 25% of the world's fresh water. And so as a city, we're going to see continued growth just because of that. I think other places are going to see the value of that. And maybe, what we can do is get New York and Ohio and Michigan to join Canada, and then we can own it all, right? I don't know if that's going to happen. So I think what I've done is I've talked about a lot of things that maybe have just sort of put things in perspective. And so what I hope that is when you're talking to your clients and they're saying, well, it's going to crash, you can say, okay, well, let me just point out a few things. And now you've got all of that. And so, you're thinking about, you're sitting back and thinking, well, life is pretty good. Toronto's never going to crash. Well, it wouldn't be that presumptuous, because I think that would, overinflate my ego especially. But, I think about, and Dave, in your market, this is how I see things. You've got Toronto, you've got the downtown core, that bright red bullseye. And then as you expand from that bullseye, and those are big expansions. Let's say the 401 would be the first expansion. The prices are, let's say, not going to decline as much. And then as you go out, you're going to get to this point where things are going to just stay kind of relatively stable. Maybe if you're in Dryden, Ontario, there might be a dip, or some manufacturing kind of locations where that is. But you're going to get out to this area. I think that the whole region around the lake, drawing a big, 500 kilometer circle around Toronto, is always going to be, in pretty good shape, because people are, it kind of works that way. And I think that, so a couple of weeks ago, I had an opportunity to talk to George Karras, who's a friend of mine, and he said, there's plenty of runway left in this market, and I truly believe that. We've got a long way to go before we hit to the same sort of categories. We're seeing it in parts of the city now, where new condos are hitting that sort of $1,500 square foot mark. If you go to New York, you can go to 54th Street near the park, and the condos are $10,000 a square foot. So I don't think we can get there. It's going to take a long time. But some people say that we've got to run about a 10-year cycle behind Manhattan. So I think I like to think of us as our own region, not compare us to anything. So it's not just immigration. It's not just interest rates. It's not just condo development and all these sort of things. There's a real host of other bits and pieces that all come into it. And I think it's that diverse local economies that we have. It's that sort of cultural, ethno-cultural thing that we've got going on. And, one of the things that, people talk about is that sort of affordability aspect of it. Say, things aren't affordable anymore. Well, according to our economists, you look at, if you're, we're still very much under that sort of 39% threshold debt to earnings ratio. And so, unlike Vancouver, I think that we have a very strong foundation. If you look at Vancouver, prices are going up, but what's below that? There's no industry below that. I mean, maybe forestry, but there's no legal team. There's no economic sort of thing that's propping this up. And so I see that as being a little bit trickier. And certainly, if Vancouver folded, there would be some spin-off residual effects to Toronto. But again, we are this city that is really on a very high growth pattern. I think that's going to continue for some time. And I've been about 40 minutes or so. So I feel like I've talked a lot. Just had any questions? Not about the Competition Bureau, and not about notice pages, but no, seriously, if you have anything specific that I could add to the equation, I'd certainly love to take some questions.
Well, I have one question. What kind of following, like we were talking about in regards to the construction, properties being built, like larger properties being built. Do you think Canada will be following along those lines? Was Toronto be seeing something like that coming through?
So what's happening in Toronto, and what I see is that there's the condo market in that sort of $400,000 to $700,000 range is still very, very strong. And I look at some of those sales that are happening, and I don't see them as being like selling $2,000, $3,000 over. They're selling $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 over. And why is that? It's because people who are sort of forced out of the homes are moving into condos. And the other thing that we start to do is we start to change the way we live. And so we're looking at different types of living. So we buy income properties for one. We live in one unit, and then we rent out the other until the point where we can afford to, let's say, kick out the main floor tenant, and we'll move into there. And then we wait another little while, and we'll kick out the basement tenant until the little houses are. So people are doing that. Other things that I see is that people are buying houses with friends and kind of cohabitating. Maybe not like living together, but buying a duplex, and I'll take one, you take the other, right? And they have a set goal. One of the houses that I owned years ago with my wife was the co-owner was her sister and brother-in-law. And they lived upstairs, we lived downstairs. We said, we're here for 5 years. And after 4.5 years, we were ready to strangle each other. And so we said, okay, we're talking to our separate ways, but at least we had built up tons of equity. And we were handy, so we worked on the house. So I think that what's happening in Toronto is it's one of those sort of drive to get qualified places unless you're willing to adapt the way that you live. And it's interesting in the condo market, we're still seeing you walking in 24-inch dishwasher, 30-inch fridge, 30-inch stove for people who never cook, right? Sometimes, how many condos have we been in with a sticker? The energy sticker is still there, right? And so they boil a kettle and they maybe heat up some soup, and that's about all they do. So I think we're going to see like a fundamental shift in how we live and get used to smaller spaces. Like in New York, 3-bedroom apartment doesn't exist, but 2-bedroom apartment is 500 square feet. So I think we'll start to see that. And just a personal experience is, I'm moving out of a bigger house into a smaller house where I'm going to be debt free and be able to enjoy a higher quality of life.
Any questions?
What are the factors? Well, in your opinion, so East has always not done as well. East Toronto has never done as well as West Toronto has done. What are your really thoughts on
that? When we're talking about that today, because I think that's when I look at the numbers, I think that there's the number of houses and condos selling over asking is actually higher in the East, like Leslieville, that East, is that what you're talking about? Yeah. So Leslieville beaches, that sort of thing, and lower in the West. And I'm not really sure, but one of the things is that maybe more condos in the West. But when I was driving into breakfast television at 5 o'clock this morning, I realized when you're driving east, the sun is in your eyes. And I think about all the people who were, first came to Toronto thinking, let's live in the east so that when we go to work, we're going to have the sun in our eyes, right? So I actually think that what's happening in like West Leslieville, Lower Riverdale, that kind of area, is that there was a lot of brownfields that are getting bought up and turned into hard lofts, and people are really attracted to that kind of life. It's kind of a free type of life and very exciting. So I see that for the short term, the East is going to be good. But if you're looking for deals, you got to come to the West. I tell you, like that's where there's like when I'm looking at things, I'm seeing a lot of houses under that $600,000 price threshold that are not selling multiple offers. So there's some great deals.
As far as you oversee the trends in the real estate, and based on, let's say, numbers of immigrants or new people.
Yeah.
So it would be great if you might know the real numbers of different channels to reach the new people or prospective clients. So different sources.
Right.
So how to reach.
So I think that as I said, one of the things that's interesting about Toronto, we're talking about communities and people, how to reach those communities, right? So one of the great things about no matter where you are from around the world, there's a community for you. Basically, there's a newspaper, there's a website, there's something, and those are really the greatest places that you can go to connect with people. And I think that language goes a long way. Dealing with people who speak your language and understand your the culture that they grow up with. So does that answer the question? You're trying to connect with, let's say, people from across the pond, right? You want to try and tell them how great Toronto is. So, I think that you do that by blogging and by talking to, going on junkets and stuff like that. How many people go to China to talk to make connections with other people in China. So that's an expensive way to do it. I'd say blogging is probably one of the best ways, and then just advertising in local papers, right? And press unknown, saying, have you thought about it? You've got money to spare? Come and invest in Toronto. Here's why.
Social media?
Social media will work for sure. I mean, obviously, there's some places where our social media doesn't translate, but I think for the most part, it's speak the whole world, right? I think Shanghai is a perfect example of that, where they said the official language is English. So they said this is the way of the future.
Yeah.
So, what do you think, Mark, is one of the greatest threats to the industry in the next 12 months?
So I really think that we're not going to see a lot. It's just like, for a problem to exist in the home market, I think we're going to have to find something, not just one thing. I don't think it's just going to be interest rates. I don't think it's just going to be, an immigration flow stoppage. I think you have to have kind of a combination of 3 or 4 things. So let's say, like a bank closes or decides to move. And at the same time, interest rates go up, and at the same time, it's going to be. It has to be. I think it has to be a correction rate because we can live through an interest rate. A rise in interest rates is going to stop people from coming to Toronto. I believe because in times when things get a little bit tougher, they're going to say, you know what, there's safety in numbers, and they come to Toronto. There's going to be jobs there. Even if I'm a physicist from another country, and I lose my job because my house got blown up. Well, I'm going to come to Canada, and I can be a cab driver, I can be an Uber driver, or whatever. There's opportunities, and then you can sort of work the ladder up there, and that's great. That's great. As far as the country goes, that's a great thing to have. So, anyway, any other questions? It's been really a great pleasure to kick this off, and thank you very much. Really appreciate it. My pleasure. Thank you very much.
So that wraps it up for tonight. I'm sorry, yeah, it's only a question. It just first of all, it was a great insight to the market drivers, essentially, right?
Yes.
But as we know, in human beings' life, it's 10% depends on what happens around you, and 90% depends what you do, how you react.
Yeah, for sure.
And personally, I'd like to hear your personal opinion, maybe looking one-on-one on the service that my company brings to the real estate professionals, and how you personally can reach to your clients and make your life easier and work less and make more.
Well, I don't think there's any magic to it. The harder you work, the more money you make.
We have to make
You're the magic, yeah. And I think that when you think about Toronto and our industry across the province, I think people come into our business thinking that this is going to be easy money, and often they're disappointed. I would say more often than they're not, they're disappointed because it is remarkable how much work goes into our business. And there was a time when the thought was talk to 50 people, have 50 meaningful conversations with the people, and you'll get one deal out of that. That's changed. It's not 50 conversations. It's probably 80 conversations. And the reason is because they're talking to other people who do it for less. They'll do whatever you do for less. That's their go-to place. So I think what I try to do is talk to my people about it, and I know Tim does that, and a lot of good, great managers do that, is they say, listen, you can't lose by knowing more. So you go to, you got 2 people coming out of Berea College, they know the moves, they don't know how to dance. You go to a firm, one firm says, here's all the help, here's all the training, here's what we talk about every day, and the other guy says, we don't offer anything, but you'll make a lot of money. And I think when those 2 people are approaching a client together, they approach it from different angles. Me, personally, I think there will be people that say, yeah, fine, I just give my house on MLS. But there's another group of people who are going to say, let's drive into market. And pricing right now is a moving target. We have situations where you list a place and you think, oh, this is the top end, and then they get, $100,000 more. And other times we think, we've got lots of room and nothing happens. And so trying to get pricing is one of the hardest things there is to do right now as an agent. And I'm so glad that I don't have to do that. As a manager, I have to do that. So, but we can talk about that for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the goals that Abby and I have with Ari and Mark, TO, is to share marketing strategies. And Mark was here along the next year. But anyway, it's and then going forward, and as we did in the past, we'll cover that kind of ground. Next month, in fact, Rebecca Mountain, who's an expert in social media, is coming in to share her thoughts with us. We're 100% certain where that's going to be yet, so make sure you stay on else. So that's great.
I can walk there.
Okay, excellent. So let's But the goal moving forward is to provide or share that kind of information with people who actually do it, people that are in the trenches. And we thought it'd be wonderful to start the year off with some insights about the industry first.
I think it's important, and quite frankly, I think that the fact that you guys are here, you guys that are watching right now, you're already so much farther ahead of the game than all the people that are not doing it, that are sitting at home or have second jobs or whatever it is. Because you can't be successful being part-time. You got to be full-time. You got to work hard. You got to work easily 8 hours a day. You have to. And I feel it's a private time for yourself, but the more you work, the luckier you get.
And it's an honorable, and it's a lot of way to make a living. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Absolutely.
And I think we thought about this industry in the past is not kind of being honorable. We put ourselves down a lot, but you know what? We do a really good job, and we work really hard for you guys. And so be proud of what you're doing. And I talked about Alpha City, which I really truly believe in, and I believe that realtors. Yeah, Alpha City. So we talk about when all the cities, when all the parts of the GTA combined, they call it the mega city. I hate that. But Alpha City, think about Alpha, premier, #1, right? And how many cities across the world? I mean, my wife is French. She says Toronto, not Paris. Hello. But I said, okay, fine, I'll give you that. We don't have the history, we don't have the streets and the chaos, but center of finance, center of arts and entertainment, in Canada. So on the Canada scale, we are an Alpha City. We have to, I think, what I try to get through in all my conversations and talking to agents is consider yourself to be that the promoter of the Alpha City. You are an ambassador for us, and so be proud of the fact that you're representing, you're helping people establish a basis in one of the only Alpha cities in the country. So that's a really noble invention. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I guess we're done. Before we leave, I just want to thank Patty, who's been behind the camera all night on the sound. You guys are here, partner in crime. And we'll see you next month. Yeah, I'll be there.